Hello, everyone. Welcome to a regular City Council meeting of February 23rd, 7 p.m. All council members and mayor are present with the exception of Katie Perkins, who is ill. Begin with the prayer or thought by Kim Palmer, followed by the pledge.
Before thee this evening as city representatives and community members. We're grateful for the opportunity we have to serve our community. We're grateful for the many blessings that we have in this beautiful place that we live. We're grateful for the moisture that has fallen recently and asking to continue to bless us with that which we stand in need of. We're grateful for this country that we live in, asking to watch over and care for it, that those that are in leadership positions will do what is best for all of us. We're grateful for those that serve in the military and asking to watch over and care for them. We're grateful for the many blessings that we have. And we say his name, Jesus Christ, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, has council had occasion to review the agenda and the minutes? Are there any corrections or comments?
I will motion to approve the consent agenda and minutes from February 9th, 2020.
It's Monson and Turk, all in favor?
Aye.
Sounds like everybody. Are there any particular declaration of interest on any item? Hearing none, we'll move into public input or public forum. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to address council on any item of their concern this evening? Seeing none, we'll move right into the reports. I have nothing particular, any information from council of interest.
I spoke to the county clerk about the ballot issue, and he was very amenable to having one here, but we would need a interpreter because the way that things are saying now, he says they are reworking that settlement agreement, so things maybe would change depending on how things come out.
Okay, well, it's good. I mean, they'll consider it and they'll hopefully I hope there's a good chance we can get it. They've got more time to work on it this time. So thanks for that. Anything else from council?
A letter?
Yeah.
Good.
Anything from administration specifically before we move into the staff reports?
Just heads up, the Bandus annexation, which I guess you guys approved a few months ago, right, Brad?
September.
60 days have gone by and the survey wasn't done, so we basically have to bring that before you again next week. So
You have to readopt the ordinance.
right. So just so you're aware when we, not next week, next council meeting, so you're aware that when that comes before you.
I guess there's been a number of different things that have delayed that, but it's been pretty frustrating. I've kind of poked and prodded and I've been poked and prodded and okay, so because of the time limit, then we have to bring it up again. And is just for our approval or is there another public hearing on it?
No, you don't have to have a public hearing. You have to readopt the ordinance.
That adopts, that accepts the,
Well, if it's adopting an ordinance, we would have to hold a public hearing, correct? Let me look into it and we'll find
Okay.
We'll
out.
talk to the attorney about it.
Yeah.
let's, because we had public hearing.
Yeah, I think we'd have
It's
to
not
redo the
changing.
public hearing, so. We'll find out.
But the same timing might apply, so. Okay, let us know and let's get it done. It's been forever. So moving into staff reports, financial status. Text got small again.
Electronically. So, you printed it out.
Yeah. Tiny, but the numbers are big.
Explanatory notes could be the same size if the text of the numbers, the text of the numbers were bigger.
Kind of change it. It's better to turn it sideways or something next time. See if we can't figure out why that.
Kim was hoping that she printed it.
It's not beyond my range of vision, but it's pressing it a little.
Our sales tax report for February today, and it looks like our overall is still up 7% over last year's numbers, so we're in pretty good shape. We've done really well this right hard time, so that's good news. Expenses are under budget. We've got some stuff that is out there to be spent, some one-time money, one-time expenses that they haven't quite purchased the stuff yet. They'll have to have those purchased by the first of June. Any specific questions?
The same,
I think we had less participate this year. David had a hard time getting kids to play this year. Those numbers were down.
Although, on that note, this number just reflects all that, but we've had, I can't remember what David told me, he said something like 3 times. So, as we see.
still looks strange, and maybe it's right, but $7,000 different seems way off.
I can double check it, but that comes
Okay.
from Flores.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
His numbers were, you'll see. So
Yeah, and then what tournament revenue were we planning on?
specific thing, we just put that in
To this part.
yeah, I don't think there was anything on there that I was going to point out.
Hey. Has actually already been done through the budgeting process, and for people that and it's just
He's in here.
Yeah. That's the key.
It has to be.
Spending is concerned. Big budget numbers can hide all kinds of things. This is detail. Nothing hides in there. Okay, project status. Terry.
Hey, Mayor, Council, used to the new agenda format on project status. I didn't do it status like I've done in the past, but we've got a few video up. Dave. So we have a marketing video on carbon-free power project that UAMPS has put together, and this is part of looking for interest in the carbon-free power project, but it's fairly quick and pretty informative. Was it this one?
Yeah, it's under the Chrome tab.
We felt like it would be worthwhile for Mayor Council. We have a marketing video on carbon. Well, there's that too.
It's on the show, exit out of YouTube, and then it's on to the left tab.
This guy?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
I'm Doug Hunter, Chief Executive Officer and General Manager of the Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems, or UAMPS, as we call ourselves. Thank you for taking a few minutes to view this video introduction to the carbon-free power project. We will provide a project overview and discuss the technology involved, the contractual components of the carbon-free power project, a timeline and cash flow, and how you can get involved. Without further ado, please enjoy the presentation.
The UAMPS Carbon-Free Power Project is the first small modular nuclear reactor project in the United States. It uses NuScale Power's advanced light water reactor technology that is simple, flexible, built in a factory, and is dramatically safer than traditional large reactors. If necessary, the NuScale SMR shuts itself down and self-cools for an indefinite period of time, with no operator action required, no additional water, and no AC or DC power needed. It is the first ever small modular reactor to have received U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission design approval. This next generation nuclear facility will be located at a site within the boundaries of the nation's premier nuclear research facility, the Idaho National Laboratory. Unlike other small modular reactor projects, the Carbon-Free Power Project, or CFPP, is not theoretical or far off in the future. It uses proven technology first deployed by the U.S. Navy. The licensing, development, financing, and construction of the project are all straightforward and doable. It will be up and running, producing affordable, dispatchable electricity by the end of the decade. Each SMR NuScale power module is capable of producing 77 megawatts of carbon-free power. A nuclear plant that houses 12 modules has a total output of 924 megawatts of energy. Plants can be scaled all the way down to 4 modules with a total gross output of 308 megawatts. The Carbon-Free Power Project will be interconnected to the transmission grid at PacifiCorp's Antelope substation, making it available to utilities within the balancing authorities of PacifiCorp, Idaho Power Company, Bonneville Power Administration, and Western Area Power Administration, as well as the new energy imbalance market in the West. The project will provide dispatchable carbon-free energy, allowing individual utilities greater flexibility to follow the load. The plant will provide reliability 24 hours a day, 365 days per year, and at a price below that of other generation options. The SMR project will enable, complement, and stabilize high amounts of renewable energy, allowing many utilities to completely decarbonize their energy portfolios while ensuring grid stability. The Carbon-Free Power Project will be owned by UAMPS and will also be available to additional ownership partners. UAMPS members have currently contracted to purchase 100 megawatts for a minimum term of 40 years from the 2029 commercial operation date. The project has contracted with NuScale and Fluor Corporation to license and construct the power plant, and UAMPS will operate it. As a risk management tool, the carbon-free power project has a contractual agreement with NewScale to ensure that the facility will deliver energy over its first 40 years of operation at a cost not to exceed $55 per megawatt hour. That price is an all-in cradle-to-grave cost that makes the project more competitive with other non-intermittent dispatchable energy sources, but with the additional great benefit of being carbon-free. If during development, the delivered energy cost rises higher than $55 per megawatt hour, then the project may terminate, and depending on the state of development, participants will receive back all or a portion of their out-of-pocket costs. The U.S. Department of Energy is a key partner in the project. It has granted a cost-sharing award over the next 9 years of up to $1.4 billion, subject to annual appropriations. The cost-share arrangement starts with DOE contributing 79% of the cost, and the participants contributing 21% of the cost. The DOE shares decline over the 9-year period, so the DOE provides a total contribution of 23%, most of it in the early years of the project, which reduces risk to participants. A number of options exist to participate in the carbon-free power project. For example, public power utilities may join UAMPS as a member and participate through take-or-pay contracts. Other utilities may participate by entering into power purchase agreements or by becoming joint owners of the project. Utilities that join the project as a UAMPS member by June 1st, 2021 may receive a first mover discount of up to $5 per megawatt hour, with the added benefit of no participant billing until after commercial operations begin. Join UAMPS and help bridge today's technology into tomorrow's carbon-free energy needs.
Thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. I will be in touch in the next several days to answer any questions and discuss your interest and participation in the carbon-free power project.
Okay, hopefully that was somewhat informative.
Well, the $5 discount for, I wasn't following who exactly that was.
In the project.
Right, and we're already in, so.
But anybody who joins the project by the end of, what is it, June?
Because I thought I was in that, I was trying to guess whether they were saying anybody new coming on board, or is it everybody who's already on board as well?
It includes those coming in new. So typically the mayor asks where we're at on subscription. And this is in February 18th. Step toward realizing full subscription. The carbon-free power project was taken out February 15th, 2021. UAMPS and Washington State Electric Utility entered into a non-binding letter of intent to facilitate due diligence associated with the utility's potential participation in the CFPP. The LOI identifies an indicative level of participation interest for the utility at 150 megawatts. The LOI provides for a due diligence framework that identifies June 1st, 2021 as the date by which participation must be contractually solidified to realize an early subscription discount. The Washington State Utility is among a number of Western utilities that have expressed interest in joining CFPP to bring the project to full subscription. The size of the plant may range from 6 small nuclear reactor modules producing 462 megawatts to 12 modules producing 912 megawatts. The level of subscription interest over the next several months will help determine the plant configuration. So with the 100 the UAMPS members have already subscribed to, that puts us at 250 potentially potential subscriptions. So we're probably more than halfway at least on a 6-pack.
I think the environment right now might be good for some big boys to come in as they're realizing that the other carbon-free or theoretically carbon-free alternatives don't necessarily provide them power when they need it.
Correct.
And ours, this does.
Yeah.
Maybe some big fish will get attracted here.
So, I mean, at this point, utility in Washington State
it's already subscribing to 50% more than all the gas chambers.
Yeah, that's a big number. Okay.
Okay, real quick on just a couple of water issues. We've decided to move forward and pump between 100 to 150 acre feet of recapture water up to the third. We attempted to start that yesterday, and we've got a bad solenoid at the pump station, and we blew a water line apart. So struggling.
Sounds like my,
The water line was separate from the solenoid at recapture. Separate from the what? Were those related or? Yes, yeah. We have to repair the water line in order to continue pumping. We have a solenoid ordered and we're working on that repair. That may or may not be a warranty item with our storm drain contractor. So it's very near the work they did, but it's not within the trench or the patching that we've done on there. So we're not 100% certain. I'm not sure if my guys got that uncovered or not this afternoon to try and assess that situation a little better, but I've contacted the contractor and they're ready and able to come help with any warranty work that they need to perform. So we're good that way. And then the last part, I guess, of this, we have the dam feasibility study, which is kind of thick. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. And we have Javen Ivins and Scoot Flannery with Jones and DeMille Engineering. They're the folks who worked on this report for Councilmember Nelson. Just part of our water planning moving forward and always thinking ahead. Councilmember Turk, who's over water, and then Councilmember Shumway, former Councilmember Shumway, and the mayors, those guys have really been interested in this project. Of course, all of council has approved it in the budget, and we completed this study. And we've learned some good information. I'll let these gentlemen present that. They have some slides. We can bring those up.
I'm assuming your presentation is going to answer my questions and then I won't ask them.
I hope so.
So that's the goal.
All right, so I'll just briefly introduce myself. I know most of you, and I hope you know me as well. But I'm Javen Ivins. I'm born and raised here, lived here my whole life. And tonight I'm representing Jones DeMille Engineering. So this was the feasibility that he contracted with us to do. This kind of a summary of what we did. The primary purpose of this study was to analyze the possibility of constructing a new reservoir to store additional water.
You tell me when to go through.
Okay. Does the clicker work by chance?
I don't know.
There's a button on the side, turn it on,
Okay, it's
and
on.
then it gives you a picture roll and see.
I'll be your clicker.
Okay.
Just pointed at him. That's how you only click and not do.
So in this study, we considered two sites. One is a site up near where Cherry Creek comes into Johnson Creek. It's at the on-stream location, which is referred to for the most part in the report as JC2. And then JC1 is another alternative that is just kind of up the mountain road a little ways.
How far is it from dry wash? That JC1?
I'm not
Mile and a half.
Is it
That's what your report says.
Yeah.
Start to-
Before you get to dry wash on the left, there's kind of a little natural basin.
Yeah, it's kind of
The road before the cattle guard.
Oh, wow. And throughout the report, I might refer back to that first slide just to kind of get, or that first,
This guy?
yeah, that one, just to kind of get a little bit better idea. You can go to the next slide now. So I wanted to kind of just hit on the main points. If you guys read through the whole report and you have questions, even if it's, after tonight, feel free to reach out to us and we can get those answered for you. So kind of what we were shooting for is just, the most storage that we can get. As we know, water is always kind of an issue here. We need as much as we can get, and when we get it, we need to store it. So the two sites that we looked at, we kind of just started to look and see what a dam similar to the size of dry wash could get us. And at both of those sites, about 200 200 to 300 acre feet would be available. Dry wash is about 70 feet tall. And so that's where we started our kind of our analysis. And after we looked into it a little bit more, the JC2 location is because of the nature of the topography up there. We would be able to build a larger dam for less embankment volume. It turns out to be quite a bit more efficient for the volume of embankment to the volume of water storage that you'd be able to get. And so that's where the 110 and the 80 foot analysis comes from. And with the 110 foot dam, we'd be able to get a little over 500 acre feet. And you can go to the next. It's anticipated that the new dam will likely require similar items and features as the dry wash reservoir did. And so that's kind of how we based our cost analysis.
Well, I was curious about that because the JC1 location, I can see that. It's that open basin. And then I guess the elevation must rise quicker than I think because you don't get much storage there.
Yeah.
But that other location, you're right in those rock walls, and that seemed like a completely different animal to me.
Yeah.
But
and if you notice on the previous slide, the embankment volume, I guess I only showed the 70 foot dam, but if we just went up like 10 feet, the embankment volume would nearly double, which obviously nearly doubles your price as well. And so that's why I mentioned that the JC2 location will be more efficient. You know, like you were saying, it's steeper and I guess more ideal for a dam.
When compared to dry wash, dam is a lot bigger because of where you're just prices where the comparisons are similar.
Okay.
So for those prices that are there, the JC1, it comes out to be about 3.5 million. And that's for a 70 foot dam, mind you. The 80 foot dam for the JC2 location is just under 3 million, and a 110 foot dam is about 5.5 million. About 20% of that is what we expect to be engineering fees and, you know, just working everything out. And then due to just much uncertainty and the high level of this study that was done, we put a 30% contingency on there just to, I guess, show what it could potentially cost. Likely, I guess I wouldn't say likely, but there is a chance that it would be less, but that's something that we'd have to investigate further in a more in-depth study. You can go ahead and go to the next one. So one of the parts that we looked at in the study was just the current storage capacity that Blanding has in all the reservoirs. And this is something that Terry sent me and we used quite heavily in our study. There's 3,600 acre feet available. And that's, you know, if all the reservoirs are completely full. However, due to the nature of where we live, we only begin each year with about 1,900 acre feet. So that's, I mean, a little bit more than half, but not much. And what's appealing to these dams, I mean, most people don't realize how much you lose to evaporation, but that is something that is a large loss. You lose several 100 acre feet, really.
When you say begin the year, you were talking about beginning the water year? So we're talking October?
January 1st.
Okay. So it's a calendar year.
Calendar year, yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. And I think I did mention that a little bit, go into that a little bit more in depth in the report. And so with the additional storage that's up higher, since it is up higher, it would be less prone to losses due to evaporation.
And the JC2 is deeper. I mean, you have a lot less inundation and surface area and at a higher altitude. So does that start to become a significant factor in evaporation? The surface area and temperature, and you're reducing both of them by going up there.
Yeah.
The JC2 is about what, 70 feet deep, or how deep was that one?
So we looked at 3 different ones. There's a 70-foot dam, an 80-foot dam, and a 110-foot dam included in the report. So yeah, that's exactly right. You decrease the area, increase, I guess, smaller surface area, less potential for evaporation. So yeah, that's, I guess, another factor that we definitely need to look into in a more in-depth study, sometime in the future that could be. And I did mention in the report as well, the JC2 on-stream location has more potential for borrow material. There's more material that could be used for the embankment. The JC1 location, which is detailed a little bit more in the geotechnical report, which is included in the report. That's why it's so thick. It's like 100 pages long. I didn't even read the whole thing. Due to some soil types and some, I guess, natural features that seem to be present there, it wouldn't be very from that area. And so there isn't.
For clarification, when you say borrow material, you mean materials already on site?
Yeah, that would be excavated and then used for the dam embankment itself. Yeah, thanks.
Just the amount of borrow material you use out of there, is it a significant factor in the total storage necessarily, or is it a relatively minor?
It's pretty minor, but
It's factoring cost.
yeah.
I can see that, because you're not transporting.
And in the geotechnical report, actually, there is, it shows a pretty large map of the area that has potential sites for borrow. So that's something that obviously a factor.
I wonder on JC2 side, if you're going out there, but if the roads are in the bottom, that's going to be inundated. Hopefully you don't get a lot of problems. But,
Yep.
That would be an interesting conversation if this moves forward.
My bearings again. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I won't go through this whole list. It's included in the report. You guys can take a deeper look into it. And if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to us. The pros, there are more pros to the JC1 location, but kind of just how we felt the pros for the JC2 location are, I guess, more significant. And so that, I guess, that weighed a little bit more heavily, and that's kind of why we, I don't know if you can kind of sense it, but I seem to be advocating more for the JC2 location. It seems to be more plausible and more feasible. You get more, like I said, storage for your embankment volume.
Well, the other thing I looked at was not that it matters particularly, but I looked at the total inundation area compared to the storage. And you want more storage but less impacted area if that's something that matters. But the other thing I looked at more particularly was relative to the cost. What's the cost per acre foot of storage? And you're spending a lot more money to get less storage at that lower site.
Right.
And if you could pull off the 110-foot dam for about 40% increase in cost, you double your total.
Right.
Your bang for buck is there in a big way at that location. So I did all of this. I thought that's the one I'm really liking. And then I continue to read where you guys are saying this is the one we really like. And I thought, well, okay, I'm not too far off track then. But then I started having concerns about some of the other issues they brought up.
Yeah.
So anyway, keep going. Don't let me disturb you too much.
But essentially, you're saying even though there's more pros for JC1, you feel like the pros in JC2 outweigh the total number of pros in JC1.
Right. Oh man. I don't know what's hitting me, but I feel like I might pass out.
Better take a seat.
Why don't you have a seat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're looking a little bit pale, so you're good. Don't worry about it.
Oh,
Let's go take over.
You can just talk to us from there.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it like you, but
I've had this experience, so yeah,
Oh, yeah.
take all the time you need to just sit and mellow it out.
I guess maybe, are there over and then maybe go to their questions?
I mean, the reality is everything's in that report. I think that if there's report. Basically, what they looked at is, is there anything right? So it's contained in the report. If you-
Saying that the pro you feel outweigh the pro one. Can you give a similar comparison in the cons? Are the cons more difficult to overcome in JC2 than JC1? What's your high level recommendation on that? I guess Terry, you can chime in on that too.
That's a good question. I think, in my opinion, the number one would be cost and just bang for your buck. And if the other cons, everything else is, you can engineer your way out of it. But I think the biggest thing is how much are you getting for the money spent?
So I guess more obstacles in getting JC2 though, those can be overcome, you think, pretty easily, or?
That's what I'm
So, yeah, I guess none of them are super easy to overcome. One of the biggest things is just in now storage here with 110 foot dam, you're getting the rest of it about the same size as dry wash. And so, of course, and sharing that storage with Wyoming Irrigation Company and other users, it would probably be in the best interest of the city to have a larger reservoir.
Well, and that helps solve some, you mentioned the water rights can get more complicated because you're on the stream and not just pulling water you already own into a different location. But it may actually simplify some of the issues we have where how do we know whose water we're actually using when it's falling on the south side of the mountain and it's running into our tunnel because gravity does what gravity does. And everybody knows that gravity does that. But we don't really know to what extent the city actually benefits.
Right.
But if we're storing it there, then we might have a better chance of actually making it more equitable across the different shareholders in the ditch company. We don't know what funding sources they may have. And I was interested in was this comment. It says by 2030, approximately 1,900 acre feet of storage are required. Exceeds the average beginning storage. So if we can substantiate that and really scientifically prove out a sense of urgency, we need this. Otherwise, we won't have the water resource that we need to sustain our community.
Right.
Then that starts helping us pull some levers to help make it happen. And so that I'm really curious how real he's looking at. Well, okay, my only other question is if somebody can explain this water balance thing, but maybe I'll just tomorrow morning.
I'll sit down the whole time now.
Over to CP's in the morning. I'll have it. You can explain. We don't want to waste the council time, and that's just my curiosity because I got lost really quick.
Yeah, we put water in equals water out.
Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah, but he wants to understand how we can improve.
Yeah, I got lost in there. there, so we'll get together and you can explain it to me. Thank you. Feel better, Chapin?
Yeah.
You're marginally better, so just don't move too fast. Fine.
Doing that kind of bits as far as
Yes, I guess. A lot of it depends on available funding and how we want to prioritize it. We don't have necessarily an immediate need. I don't think this is something we would necessarily want to go out and do general obligation bonds or something to build a big project just for the sake of building a project. Beneficial in the future, we seem to have these patterns of not very good runoff for several years, have a year or two of some really good runoff, and to be able to capture that runoff on the good years makes a lot of sense. The guys at Johnson Mill, Kendrick, who started thinking about ways we could make a project work and ran some numbers. Blanding Irrigation Company is going to be paying off here in the next 5 years. That debt. And then the pipeline. And uh, 5 years, they will pay off Lloyd's Lake and recapture the debt that they have on the capture reservoir. So, potential partners right here in the county. I ran some quick numbers for the upper ditch, and to have enough storage to store allocation of 10 acre feet, 1,000 shares across the whole upper ditch company. Really, what we being here in Blanding is about 800 acre feet of storage. And so you saw the numbers that we ran in this study. We went with the dam that kind of fit the JC on one side, one wash that's off site, and a 70-foot dam. The number they ran, and that put us up over 500 acre feet. It's not out of the possibility to build a dam that would hold 800 plus acre feet of water. And that would make a project, I think, really appeal to Blanding Irrigation Company and possibly the Water Conservancy District. The Conservancy District is always interested in projects in San Juan County. Water storage, we recently completed the dry wash project, so there's been a lot of money spent by the Conservancy District in this part of the county, which prioritize us as high. That certainly doesn't exclude them from being a partner on the project. So I think as we move that's our need and water issue. Is on Johnson Creek itself. Whenever you're actively damming a stream, you have to get a lot of extra work. Some of the concerns I have with that one are the steeper slopes up there. We'd have to spend some money doing some drilling and actually soil sampling to determine what kind of slopes. basin, use the water pretty quick, and then have slope failures within the basin, and all the dirt ends up at the bottom of your reservoir. And you don't have possibly some structural.
Barely.
Cherry Creek, we actually have some tile to pick that water up, and it comes in right in the little pond.
I got really curious about the engineering. I don't want it plugged off for 2 years, you know, they get a little thirsty around here.
Oh, yeah.
For me, the last thing I want to do is do this and then not do anything with it. I mean, I think if we've made steps to do it, let's.
Yeah.
Do we have to redo this if we wait long enough? I mean, at one point, does this just become something we did?
It's valuable because, you know, the geotechnical report is a big part of this. And that's really valuable. It would still be
Grants and companies and
yeah.
partners in it. If we keep the conversation going, something will develop. I think it's great over time.
Actually, at the end of the report, we did list a few potential funding opportunities.
I just think it needs to be on our radar. Okay. Moving into, where are we?
We're going into public hearing, I believe.
Yeah, and I'm not my adjournment, right? Yeah, no. This right here is out. It's not in there. So.
What is that?
No, I had this.
Oh.
Started through the papers.
Oh, the reason why is because public hearing, then we list it for the business item.
Not this appointment to the planning commission. It's coming to the head of the public hearing. Well, let's see. So we have a public hearing on the discussions, items, policy, and code. If you want to remind us what this is accomplishing, and then we'll open up for public comment if there be any. Oh yeah, we need a motion to move into public hearing. And can that be across all of them, or do we have separate public hearing for each of them? I'm not sure about that.
I believe it's separate for each.
We've done it both ways.
Well,
You can
anyway,
have a motion to go
let's
into public hearing.
have a motion on
public hearing then.
Second. All in favor? That was Turk and Nielsen. So we are in public hearing, and I'll declare that it's for each of the separate items, but not all at once. We'll take them one at a time. And so on the discussion items, policy code, if you want to explain that briefly, and then we'll look to see if there's comments.
Essentially, this is just by recommendation of our city attorney, so that we don't have to have a separate work session meeting for every time we want to have a discussion of something without motions being made. All we're doing is establishing a policy in our city code that says the council can have discussion items, and essentially it's understood that during discussion items, formal motions cannot be made for approval because the intent of discussion items are simply to discuss them, get feedback, and then come back with something to formally make motion on.
Okay, so is there anybody from the public that wants to address this, or have we had any email or other electronic comment on that? And we'll leave that open. If anybody watching wants to chime in on that, but we'll include in this financial officer designee code amendment. So an explanation on that one.
Yes, so the financial officer, do we need to make a motion on each of these first?
We're just staying in public hearing.
Okay, so the financial officer, mayor designee, essentially, I, as the city administrator, am his designee everywhere. And I'm also considered the budget officer, but for some reason, under the financial section of code, it doesn't identify or the mayor or his designee. So we're simply making it consistent with everything else and establishing that the city manager or his designee. So for example, when Jeremy left and I wasn't here, Kim was the designee in the time being to help kind of manage those things.
So technically, because we didn't have the language there, I mean, it all worked and we're not in trouble or anything.
Exactly.
Technically, I had to be doing all of that. And so has every mayor for decades, and we haven't been.
Yeah, technically the mayor
Since
was supposed to
whenever
be
that
coming
was
in and
written.
improving every payroll check, all those things
Every-
according to the way the code is written.
That
So
was
we're making
not
sure that,
accurate.
yeah, because that wasn't the intent of the code, and you can see
Right.
that clearly everywhere else.
It was
So.
just missing the wording. Okay, so is there any public comment relative to that amendment to specify that it's the mayor or designee? And hearing none on that, but also leaving that open for anybody who wishes to make a comment. Let's get just the explanation on our purchasing procedures.
Okay. Yeah, as explained in the prior meeting, to move this to public hearing, essentially we found some conflicts in our purchasing policy in city code and an administrative policy that we had. And so in discussing this with our city attorney, we found it best to simply create an administrative policy like we have that gives a little more detail than what our administrative policy had, and simply have code defer to the administrative policy so that, through time, like numbers change, like expenditures, because costs increase. And so through time, you don't have to change code every time you want to adjust the administrative policy. So all this code is doing is saying that that purchasing procedures refer to the administrative policy. So after you approve this code, then we actually have the business item to officially approve the administrative policy as well, to coincide with it.
Okay. Any comment from the public on that item? Seeing none and hearing none, I would accept the motion to leave public hearing on these three items.
I make a motion that we leave public hearing.
Bowers and Monson, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's everybody. No discussion items particularly. So on to business items. Sean Begay has accepted an appointment as a member of the Planning Commission. So I would accept a motion to approve that appointment and get him rolling. He's actually rolling already, attended the meeting and as a non-voting observer. But he's excited to get going.
Well, that's great news. We need a motion?
Yep. Well, no, that's advice and consent. That's the appointment's made. It's just the council says, yeah, we like it or not. So
Okay.
everybody likes Sean on there. Okay, he is officially in.
And we'll send a letter to him.
Yep.
Provide him more.
Okay, discussion items policy. So now we've had the public hearing on that and we've discussed it, but we can have any further clarification that we would like to before we vote on that item.
I'm good with it. I'll motion to approve ordinance 2021-1, an ordinance regarding the discussion items.
So you can vote in the same public meeting? I mean, you can have the public hearing
Mhm.
and vote in the same meeting?
Yeah, so how
We've
it
never done
functions
that.
is you bring it before council for motion to go to public hearing, and then you hold the public hearing and vote on the business item after the public hearing's been
So I
held.
was thinking we had to wait 2 weeks, but okay.
But you're right on the wait 2 weeks, but we did that last week to make a motion to go to
Oh,
public
got
hearing.
it. All right.
I'll second your motion.
Okay, that's Monson and Turk. Any discussion on that motion? So in clarification, that just clarify that that is just the ordinance that establishes the policy that a discussion item cannot have a formal motion. You can still take action such as, yes, staff would like you to follow up on that issue and bring it back for more, but a
But
formal
that's under
action
advice.
establishing policy can't be given on a discussion item. So the public is aware, we won't want to take formal action on discussion items. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So the ordinance 2021-2 on the finance officer mayor designee, which is clarifying or making sure that we have that our code says mayor or designee and not mayor on approval of all of the spending in the city as it's intended. We're just making a correction there. So are there any other questions on that? So I'd accept a motion.
I'll motion that we approve ordinance 2021-2 and ordinance regarding mayor financial officer designee.
Any other questions on that? That's Monson and Nielsen. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
That's everyone. Okay, so now we might have a little bit of discussion to get this one all square in our minds on the purchasing ordinance 2021-3. Let's get a motion. Technically, I mean, you can have a lot of discussion before there's a motion, but if we have the motion, then I'll ask for questions on the motion and then we'll entertain any questions that we have.
Nothing's changed on this since we had
No,
this
it's the same as last
time.
week. And you'll find that the report for the purchasing procedures ordinance and the purchasing procedures resolution are one and the same as staff.
Right,
reports.
so it's not a duplication of the material, it sort of is.
Yeah, formalities.
Right.
Okay, so we're making a motion then on ordinance 2021-3, right? Okay, I'll make a motion that we accept that, an ordinance regarding purchasing procedure.
Okay,
I'll second it.
Turk and Monson. So questions on the motion. This is where we can look at it and say, okay, what does it mean? Are these limits appropriate? Are they in line with what our thinking should be? If you want to give a little further explanation on how we arrived here, that would probably be helpful.
Essentially, and I'll try to summarize as best I can in the staff report. It probably says it better than what I'm going to try and explain here. But essentially, we saw that in the administrative policy, which was approved, it gave spending limits, but it didn't say who approved at those spending limits. And then the city code said who approved the spending limits for certain things, but some of the numbers were outdated. So essentially, we just took both policies, used the most up-to-date type numbers. Actually, some of the numbers in the city code were more functional, but basically we one of the things that city code did is it separated for like equipment. If you buy equipment like a vehicle or computers, the approval for the city manager is at a lower limit than say if we're doing contract services to do some drywall in here, because just the cost of buying a computer versus drywall in a building is different, and that's how the code actually already distinguished it. So long story short, the key points are anything over $25,000 must come to the council and must go to formal bid and get council approval through the formal bidding process. Anything under $25,000, the city manager can approve, but has to receive at least 3 bids. Anything up to $5,000, the department heads can approve with getting 3 bids. And so essentially this just streamlines. It takes both the policies and just basically combines what we were already doing, but makes it consistent everywhere. And one of the things in the code is a couple areas, it actually didn't have a limit to how much the city manager or even a department head could approve. It said, department head approved, inform council, and it had no limit. So this actually says, hey, no, at a certain point, it's got to go before council for approval. So we just caught little things like that and simplified it.
The only limit that was imposed before was the budget and common sense.
Yes, so one of the things here to note is, so say you as council approve a $200,000 project. Well, since that's officially approved, Terry can go and sign off invoices that are higher than $5,000 or $20,000 as can I, because you've already approved the project through a formal process. And we're just approving the invoices in relation to the amount that was already approved. So just a lot of formalities, but we wanted to make sure it's spelled out what those formalities were and make sure they were consistent, because we found some inconsistencies. It's funny when you ask one or two little questions, Kim and I have found we tend to open up a can of worms and we're like, oh, we need to clean this up. And that's what happened here. So pretty simple.
So basically anything over $5,000 requires at least informing city council. With this, yeah, so I'm just.
And we're already
that's what
doing
this
that
shows.
in our monthly reports anyway.
Right.
But yeah, so basically.
Well, what was it before? I apologize. What was it before?
It was different in the administrative poly versus city code, and city code had like 6 categories. And so we kind of combined things, but I want to say it was like, well, it depends. There was one where it never had to go to council, just the department had approved. That's why I don't really have a straight answer.
There was an 8.
Yeah, there was one that was 8,000.
Unless you're paying UPNL.
Yeah, unless you're paying the power company, but then we don't have a power company by that name. And so we had to make a couple of those
It was really
corrections.
inconsistent, so we kind of just cleaned it up to make it consistent across all 3. And then you know what we're doing, what the code said and what the policy was, so that it was more clear when we go out to do purchases, what we need to do.
Right.
I think the 5,000 is probably where that needs to be. Just let council know if we make an expenditure that's not in the budget at that amount, you would want to know.
Mhm.
It's probably a good starting place.
I like it,
We may
especially since
find out
we
down the
see
road
the
that
check
it
register
needs to be changed.
every meeting, so.
So where are you, I might be reading this wrong, but where are you seeing over the 5,000? Because I see this recommended city administrative
So-
policy.
Yeah, if you go to page 69,
At the very bottom in that box.
yep, that's essentially what it's spelled out.
council.
69 and 70 is where the new proposed limits would be, who approves at what level. And we tried to keep it consistent on each thing. So essentially, anything over $5,000, no matter the category, the city manager's got to approve.
I was looking in the wrong spot. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And I apologize, it gets a little confusing because we're trying to show you all the old stuff and compare that with the recommendation.
Yeah.
So it took a while to sort out because in the code, it's not spelled out easy like this. I had to go through all the code and try to make apples to apples comparisons, which
Well, and interestingly, this whole thing was driven by a discussion which we're gonna have in the next meeting or two on salary approvals
right.
within a budget. And anyway, so there was obviously some issues there. We said, well, let's look at all of the spending procedures and make sure they're all clean. And this one was a lot more messed up.
Yeah.
So we spent the time cleaning this one up first, and the other one will be.
And it made
becoming
more sense to
still.
lead with this one first.
I thought they were gonna be clean enough that we'd have them kind of the discussion about both, and it became, you pointed out, it's pretty evident they need to be separated. So
Right.
I think you made the right call on that.
Let me just make the comment, because that we have been following the policy that's pretty close to this down here. The only thing that was missing was the approval part on what we've been doing on the policy that we were using before, like we're getting the 3 verbal or the written bids per these amounts. But this kind of makes it clear for department heads, and for me, when I have something come in, then I know that I need to make sure that Dave's seen it or Terry's approved those things. And we've kind of been doing that, but it hasn't been formalized in a policy, which will be good now because it will help our people as they are making purchases. They'll know really who needs to approve what they're doing.
Yeah, and I know this sounds funny, but sometimes like if you tell like a contractor or a consultant, hey, you're coming in at $27,000. If you can come in at 24,000, we don't have to go through the long process of bringing it before the council, going out for 3 bids or formal bids. And so sometimes that consultants they'll cut it down by a few $1,000s just to avoid that process too.
Any other questions on that? Okay, all in favor?
Okay. All in favor of,
Actually setting the policy.
okay, so
Was a motion or?
Well, no, there's been the motion, so
We were in
it's
discussion.
been long enough since we had the motion. And I will clarify that the motion was on 2021-3, the purchasing policy procedures, or the purchasing, wait.
Procedures ordinance.
Yeah. And so that's the ordinance that's going to refer to the policy. So all in favor, we had the vote, and that was everybody, none opposed. So now the purchasing procedures resolution, which is putting in the administrative policy that we're referencing in the ordinance that says this is what we're actually looking at, okay.
do we have to do a resolution?
Yes, you do to approve
Because we're changing
an
policy.
policy.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, there's all these formalities. So I tried to walk us through and Kim has done a wonderful job helping me put this all together.
So the ordinance refers to the policy, and the policy is more flexible than an ordinance would have been. As illustrated by the old spending ordinance, it says you can't spend over $8,000 on anything without city council approval except the UP&L bill. Well, UP&L hasn't even existed for 40 years, and 8,000 was,
And funny enough,
we would
that
write a lot of checks over $8,000.
and the funny part is that 8,000 reference wasn't even under purchasing procedures. It was under financial officer mayor area. So we
Yeah,
corrected that.
it was
under there.
hidden.
So it was
It's,
everywhere.
oh, these two have spent a lot of time getting it straight, but referencing so the resolution that we consider is so that the policy, so that the ordinance has something to refer to. And it's more flexible to change. We can do that by resolution, whereas an ordinance would require a public hearing if we wanted to adjust those numbers. So in all cases, there's going to be at least 6 people sitting here pondering that question. So I would accept a motion on 2023-2021-1 purchasing procedures resolution.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 2023-2021-1, the city administrative purchasing procedures policy.
Excellent. Or you can say so moved, and that works too.
I want to be very clear
It's
what I'm
faster.
approving what a motion we're
I'll
approving.
second it.
Okay, that's Bowers and Monson. Any questions on that? We've talked about the numbers, and so we're referring now to the policy that actually we will follow when we're exercising those numbers.
Aye.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Moving on. It gets confusing.
I thought I missed
I-
the vote.
I remind.
You were just being proactive.
I remind people all the time when it gets frustrating like this, the wheels of government tend to crush people, and so they need to move slowly. So it gives a chance to get out of the way, unfortunately. Okay, now transportation plan resolution. First of all, the date on this is 26th of January 2021, but
Is there a presentation for this?
It's just in a tab on a web browser. Are we ready for that, then, Mayor?
yeah, give us some information on that, because I was trying to remember when I last actually had a big document and maps and stuff that I was looking at.
Okay, so if you remember right, hopefully Dave can find it, but we'll get there in a second. So the transportation plan, the output, we've contracted with Jones and DeMille, and the output is a story map which is available. You can just click on our website, which, you know, instead of a developer having to find some document, a PDF, and download it and read it, or a citizen or a neighbor that's just outside of our incorporated boundary, it's in here. So just a quick introduction before I turn the time over to Scoot with Jones and DeMille. He's going to basically walk the council through this. This is the final plan. You know, staff recommends that the council formally adopt this plan by resolution tonight at the end of the presentation. And this is as much Brett as myself. I just got my name on it for tonight to bring it up. And we've been working on this, you know, it was a year ago when we were hot and heavy and just going into the public comment period. And then the whole COVID thing started. And so we kind of extended our public comment period informally for quite a while, just to make sure we were getting input from any citizens or neighbors. You know, if you remember right, we had Bailey get mailing information from the tax rolls for all the property within our master annexation boundary and then adjacent to that. And we sent that out to get public comment from anyone who's interested in doing that. We had an open house here at the city office, which was quite well attended. And we incorporated the comments that we received from the public into this final plan. Brett took this to Planning Commission, and I guess before I turn the time over to Scoot, do you have anything, Brett, that you'd like to add? Okay, I mean, we beat this thing pretty good, and I feel like we have a pretty good product, but.
You took it to Planning Commission and you liked it?
We took it to Planning Commission because there was some areas where the transportation plan and the general plan had a little bit different wording. And so there was some suggested changes to make those two documents work better together. Planning Commission looked those over. Scoot and those guys are checking one typo thing that they're going to look at, but other than that, we were good with the changes. So
They unanimously moved for a positive recommendation to council.
Oh, Dave, can we get the mouse for Scoot? Because he's,
That's not the house.
it's gonna be hard to run that.
So you want your computer from Claire over here?
Yeah, the computer's actually behind the TV.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm running two computers.
You can move that podium shift around.
Well,
So we need to.
so I remember, I was just thinking about this. My mission from Argentina. And the first day I woke up and looked at the streets, I was thinking, holy cow, our streets are huge. And they're square and big. And so I echo what Councilmember Turk said about planning being forward thinking and all of their planning. And you see that with water, you've seen that with streets and how it's laid out. And this is just an extension of that exact same attitude that we've had in mind. So Terry talked really good about the purposes of it to, I can't see my screen, okay. Preserve the future corridors, to come up with functional street classifications, and also to come up with typical details so that developers, when they come in, they know what they're up against when it comes to building roads. And they can also take a look at the maps and say, oh, well, it looks like there may be a road through my property. How do I make that work? So I don't know if I want to go into tons of detail walking through this, and if there's anything that you guys want to see specifically. This is a map of the past roadway classifications. And one of the reasons that we ended up looking into this, because it was just outdated, it's quite old. The growth, as we know in planning, is kind of moving towards the upper end of town. And so a lot of the area that we looked at was, okay, how do we make that work and how do we plan for the future there, including everywhere else where we anticipate there will be development. Part of the growth, no surprise, we don't expect to see blending get enormous anytime soon, or even in the next 50 years. So traffic is not going to be a huge problem. We don't anticipate that being an issue. but, you know, making sure that we stay ahead of that growth. And another thing for Brent and everybody, when you guys approve a development, there's a lot of situations in town where you've gone out and it would be great to run a road straight through here, but there's a house or something that happens to be just right in the way. Where it could have been really easy to ask that person to just move their house 20 feet back and it would have been just fine. You wouldn't have to move the whole road because of it. There's quite a few instances in town that you can see that that's been an issue. And so that's one of the things that this hopes to address. So like I said, you click on here. See this.
I'll just.
Wasn't sure what I did.
Great and powerful laws is spoken.
So here's the typical sections for each one of the different type of roadway classifications. Also typical details for items that are associated with roadway construction. This map here is actually the meat and bones of it. And this is what we sat in here and went over with everybody in public hearings. We had a lot of people come in, look at it, give us their comments. This has actually gone through several iterations due to people's comments and with Terry and Jeremy and Brett and anybody else that came in with comments. You can zoom into this. You can turn on property boundaries, and so you can see how these future corridors are associated with your property. You can look at water utilities. The water is not on there anymore. The other utilities, power, stormwater, sewer, natural gas.
For the council's benefit, I asked them to remove water for safety reasons.
Yeah, we had that on there.
I know it sounds odd, but it's a real thing.
No, it makes sense.
This is the past roadway. And then you can see when you turn the future roadway on, we went into a little more depth and a little more strategic about it. With that, there came a need to, like Brett was saying, update some of the general plan as it refers to the transportation master plan. And so, okay, yeah, Javen handed that out to you guys. You can see the changes that are recommended in red. And then there's also a paragraph there on a single sheet of paper that we gave to you that's recommended to be added to the city code. And basically what that does is it gives the city council the ability to seek to procure land for roads as needed. So it lists a bunch of ways that can be done: purchase, trade, other agreements.
Is this the boilerplate off of some iteration of state code or other cities, or what was our source?
That's a good question for our planner to put that together. He's the one that dissects all of this stuff and makes sure it works. I would imagine that it's adopted from someone who has something similar that worked good.
Do you know if our city attorney reviewed this wording at all?
I don't know if he has.
This is just recommended from the Rural Community Consultants part, Michael Hansen, partnered with Jones on the Mill.
Right. So I've taken a lot of your time. Does anybody have questions about this? I would invite each of you to get on there. It's been on your website for a while, but get on there and take it for a test drive. Look at it, zoom in on the map, check the different layers over here, turn it on, see how everything works, and direct other people to do the same thing.
You guys are officially done?
We're going to do I've noticed some wording updates. We have a lot of things that are saying recommended and this will, and once it's approved, we'll change that to more of a permanent status.
Nice work. I think that's exciting.
Thank you.
Well, there's quite a bit we need to review here. And I would like to, like Scoot said, do some test driving on that. And right now, I don't know what the questions are, so I wouldn't know what to ask. I don't know if anybody else had any at this moment.
I looked at it when it first got put up, but I think you've made changes since then, so I think it would be good to look at it again. It's very user-friendly. I found it informational, lots of good things.
You know, it's one of Terry's and Jeremy's and Brett's biggest concerns was, let's not have it be something that collects dust on the shelf for the next.
Yeah.
Sort of one step.
And at this language and get this checked out by legal and take some time to browse through this so that we're all really comfortable with what it is that would be moving forward on. And that seemed to kind of be your opinion there. You're saying let's take some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hearing, holding that public hearing and everything else.
Is this, it's actually being amended.
They're changing the
That's the path I took too. I sat on there for 8 years and then I did it for 8 more.
20 years later.
So do we need to approve the master transportation plan? And then with the exception that these items are gonna come back as an ordinance, possible ordinance
Yeah.
change.
And this is a handout, I
Do you
think,
wanna-
more for your reference right now. This wasn't
Ultimately, yeah, if
officially
everybody's
part of
comfortable with
the,
the plan itself,
agenda.
then yeah. I was kind of lumping them together, but with that clarification,
yeah.
then we have time to consider this, but if everybody likes the plan, I mean, it's been talked about for a long, long time. It's been long enough that I'd kind of forgotten where we were on all of it and that we even had to.
We did have a couple issues with a few people, and I assume those were fixed. I never followed up on any of those. but-
Yeah, getting Black had some concerns with what we were looking at down on Flower Mill Road, and we just made modifications there. The, made a change there. We ended up modifying it a little there.
The only things I really had issues with, I meant they weren't
But
issues.
if
I just
remember
wanted to
right,
make sure
this is moldable. I mean, this is what our plan is, but if there's somebody who ends up having a road going through the middle of the property that we didn't plan on, that can be changed, right?
It could be changed, yeah,
Okay.
if the council approves that.
I mean, this is the expectation, but
We would have to go
So-
through an amendment process.
Yeah, these corridors are important enough to us that we want to preserve them. So changed as far as being realigned a little bit to accommodate the way they'd like to develop their property, that's more doable than just, I don't want a road.
got it,
You know, I
okay.
mean, we are planning to have these collectors.
And this gives us more teeth moving forward into the future. So if a developer comes in and says, I want to develop this, and is talking to Brett and Terry, we can say, well, part of our transportation plan is we have this right of way, this road going through, and so they would have to work within those means because of that established plan.
Certainly, if it was, if we could realign this a little bit different to go around this hill on my property or this pond, or I can get 5 more lots and not spend any more money with a slight realignment, that type of thing, definitely we'd consider as the properties developed and and help those folks in whatever way we could.
As long as it's not.
Part of the reason I'm asking is because there was a road going right through my property in the initial version.
You don't want that road?
And I didn't address it. And so I might need to do that. I need to look at it again. The first time I looked at it, I panicked for a minute. But
And there's a lot of ways, and property owners will look at it from two different ways, but a lot of times having one of these through your property, it is an add,
yeah,
from a value standpoint, so.
unless it goes through my baseball field, then it's not good.
Good thing about roads is they typically have utilities and everything else too.
Yeah, no, and actually it depends on where it's at. If it's on the south and north end, then it's fine, and maybe that's where it is, so. That's why I was asking. I mean, not only that, but in case there's somebody who's really upset, we can work through it. I think it's great, Mike.
Yeah, the outreach before the whole COVID thing hit was extensive.
Yeah,
And it's kind of been sleeping ever since. So if council's comfortable with where it stands, knowing that it is always still flexible, we could have a motion on the plan.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2-23-2021-2, the master transportation plan.
I'll second it.
Monson and Bowers, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, got
Wow,
us a plan.
that's a great accomplishment.
And then as far as these amendments, should we,
Those will have to come back anyways, yeah.
they have to come back for a public hearing, but do we want to have a discussion on in the next meeting and set a public hearing, or do we want to set a public hearing pending legal review? Want to go ahead and set the public hearing for 2 weeks? Everybody liking that? This one? Okay. Let's have them in the next agenda as discussion items, and I'm anticipating we would then move them to a public hearing in the subsequent meeting. So, okay. Capital projects.
Okay, Mayor Council, so we've got a lot of information you probably saw in the packet. We did a lot of groundwork. I'm going to say a couple, I guess 30,000 foot level things on how we approach this. So first of all, like you saw in the staff report, the main reason today it's not a motion for adopting, because basically you're making a motion to say, yes, we're good with this, to put it into the budget in the future. The reason why we're doing things, so they kind of have established what our plan is. That's the first 30,000 foot level thing. The second one is, well, kind of piggybacking on that, just keep in mind that this capital projects plan, even though you'll say, yes, this is where we want to go, you adopt it in the formal budget, it could very well be that other things come up and you're like, no, we've changed what we want to do with this. And with that said, sorry, I'm spacing a part of what I was going to say with that. I don't know what, the next part is, you'll see that it'll say funding city X number of dollars, 50,000, I'm just throwing out a number. But that's not taking into account that maybe over the next year or two, we're going to be pursuing grants for that. We just don't have an estimate of what dollar amount grants might be. So this is just like where we should focus. And the final 30,000 foot level thing that I wanted to mention is, you'll see I put in there like parks and trails, water, sewer, basically saying, let's spend some capital dollars to put together master plans to better guide our capital projects in the future. So let's spend some money up front formalizing what exactly is our plan. So each year when we bring these capital projects to you, we all know, oh, the reason why this is in year 3 of the 10 years is because our master plan for water calls for this, or our parks and recreation trails plan calls for this. And right now, do we have the money, the funding that we want to put for that? So anyways, I'm speaking very globally. And on that note, so you'll see I didn't include baseball infield dirt. Well, I did at the bottom, but I didn't put it in next year. Infield dirt shade structure, pavilion, or splash pad, because those 4 things alone total $500,000 on their own, which I know you're not planning on spending next year. And my advice is, well, not just advice, we need to establish a parks and trails, parks, recreation trails, and open space master plan next year, because DWR and BLM, basically they have told us that if we put the money into putting together a master plan, we're basically first on the list for funding, and they've already verbally committed like a dock at Recapture Reservoir. And that's something that we had planned already. So anyways, that's kind of my global explanation there. And I don't know if you have specific questions outside of that that myself and staff can help respond to.
I guess what I'd say is, in a way, that, I mean, the immediate year that we're in, that is pretty solid. It's kind of like very slow curing concrete. We pour it way out in advance, and it takes a long time for it to become so hard that we can't change it. And so even next year's can be completely turned upside down if that's what we choose to do.
Exactly.
But we need that stuff on there in the long term to show to CIB and other funding sources that we are, that we do have a plan. We're looking forward. We're contemplating these projects. We don't just come up with them at the last moment.
I just want to share this screen. It opens the door for funding when we put together these plans, and over the next year, and as over the next coming years, as we get in funded, or as we get in these master plans, Kim and I will be refining this capital projects list to present to you. Because what I'd like to see is, okay, what's our total amount of reserves? What's earmarked for water, power, gas? What percentage is earmarked there? And so how much in general fund do we have for X, Y, and Z? I just want to be able to dive into it a little bit more. This gives a very nice 50,000 foot level, but I want to just a hair more so you can see percentage wise where we're at, so that we know if on average we spend 5% on capital projects each year, and I'm making up this number. If we spend 5% on capital projects each year, but we know in 2 years we're going to have to spend 10%, we know for the next 2 years we should probably only spend 2% capital to get ready for that 10% expenditure in 2 years. That's the kind of stuff I'm trying to think through, and Kim and I have had a lot of good discussion about. So anyways, there is that long pontification.
Okay. So are there any further questions on where we're at with this right now, as far as just approving it, knowing there's a lot of flexibility in here? And we can start looking at these numbers on some of these projects that were fairly eminent that are coming in quite pricey.
Well, there's some things on here that we haven't even talked about.
So there are a couple things. There's a couple things that we put in there, like for example, for the visitor center. So there's some things we're doing with CARES Act funding. So we're going to be doing some things in the visitor center with CARES Act funding, and in conjunction with what we're doing in there. There's a couple things that CARES Act funding aren't allowed to be spent on. We can do a billboard a couple of billboards out on the highway and stuff in the visitor center, but we can't use CARES Act funding for a capital investment like redoing the welcome to Blanding signs. And we would like to do those kind of in conjunction with each other. And so that placeholder number there, and we can't buy furniture like new seats to go in the visitor center. So that 20,000 number is roughly what, and I actually think it'll probably be less than that to redo the welcome sign. So that's one thing. Another thing, are you looking at like the self-service fill station, or what are you?
I mean, there's really anything we haven't talked about. There's lots of things we've talked about that are gone, and then things that we haven't talked about that are there. So
right, and the splash pad I moved down with all the other stuff at the bottom as not in a particular year until we get the Parks and Trails master plan. So you have a better idea of what we want and how that fits in. One is the self-serve water fill station. So for example, now we have a fill station, but it's non-potable water. And we have people that are actually coming and using it as potable water. And so there's a lot of people in the area that haul water. And right now, the way they do it with the city is they come in, at minimum, they have to pay $10 for 4,000 gallons. Most people aren't hauling 4,000 gallons. They're probably hauling at most 800 gallons. And what they do is they pay with Lisa at the front desk. They got to go between certain times. And then they go over, the guys have to help fill them up. Well, what we're looking to do, and hopefully maybe we can get some grant funding through this or something through the state, is a self-serve fill station where they can have 3 options. They can just pay cash through a dollar feed machine. They can use a credit card swipe, or they can set up an account in the office and just have a certain amount that they pay to do it, and they enter a PIN number. And I believe it's Beaver that does the PIN number.
Duchesne.
The other benefit of this is all the tourists that we have coming through with their RVs fill up water. They can easily swipe a credit card or do a dollar, the dollar machine, and fill up their RVs. And I think probably one of the other benefits is this helps kind of address in some part the concerns over water utilities over in the Westwater area. We can say that we have this self-serve fill station. They can set up an account, they can pay cash or do a credit card if they're hauling water over there. So that's kind of a ancillary benefit of that as well. So that's for consideration. Would you want to
I
consider
know we
it?
looked at
We
this
talked about that
a few years ago, and then when the price tag came up, the discussion ended within 10 seconds.
Right.
Just like, it just was so far beyond what anybody could even comprehend at that point. So I just know that's kind of where it was
Yeah,
before.
this 80,000 is a fair estimate that we were able to put together of what it would cost to do that. I personally, I was thinking if the council is of interest, we've been talking to the Lieutenant Governor's office about a variety of things. And we know that like with the power, they're really in support of what we're doing with power with UAMPS because of the benefits that it'll have to the Navajo Nation. And so I'm wondering in a similar fashion, could we maybe secure some funding for this because of the benefits that it also could have to the Navajo Nation? So that's the thought process.
My question on that would be, I assume it's not going to create enough revenue to pay back in the next 5 years.
Well, we would have to do some analysis on that.
And my other question is, isn't this a benefit that's benefiting people who aren't paying city taxes?
Well, so that's some of what we talked about is we would establish the rate, the council would establish the rate. So, a lot of it would be people from the county, like myself, living out in the county, I would come haul. And so so how much do we pay per, it's not per gallon, per 1,000 gallons, what is it, the rate at?
For residential water?
For residential water? I can't remember the exact number, but, so for example, when I haul,
$4,000, $10 for 4,000 gallons.
well, yeah.
That's what you buy it through the,
Yeah, we'd have to look at that because you have your base rate and then your, per gallon and
and
it's
it
tiered the more you
changes
use.
depending on what color the year is. Right now, I think, and it depends on if you're residential or commercial, but you're paying about, I think it's like, I want to say like $1.04.
Yeah. So for example, $1.04
I
per,
think it's $1.04, I'll tell you.
per
For
100
10,000.
I'll find it.
Okay.
And-
So a good example is when I haul in Monticello's fire station, I have a well, but I have to supplement. I pay $1 for every 100 gallons. So right now, if residents are paying $1 for 1,000 gallons, you can see how you could offset some of the price for those that are hauling, tourists that are coming through, at a still a reasonable rate, I think, so.
How much of it is used by Westwater? Is it the bulk of?
Well, that's part of what we would need to look at. Really, we don't have any benchmark to know.
Because there is a project going forward, or there's something in the
state legislature right to give water and electricity over to Westwater. There's just an article yesterday about it.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so
having
there's
that
always
effect.
something in the works. It
The
changes.
thing I want to mention though is Westwater is one component of this. And it can help in assisting us in maybe securing state funding for it. But there's multiple benefits that us as staff have seen. And one of those benefits is staff time and resources, really. And a benefit just to those. I mean, we all know people that live in not in the boundaries of the city, but consider themselves as part of Blanding, right? And several of them haul water, and so there's a benefit to them. There's multiple benefits of it, so.
So you remember with the way the
color charts.
work. So, like, right now, we're in a green year, still until the 1st of April, we decide what that color has to be. So on a residential 3/4 inch line service meter, and it's winter, you're paying $1.03, I was close, $1.03 for 5,000 gallons, and then it goes up incremental from there.
That's after you've already paid your.
That's after your base.
There's a base.
There's the base fee, and then you pay per a gallon.
27.
I was gonna say, I think it's a lot more than I got,
I think it's
27.50.
Yeah, 27.
So they should be at least paying that.
And you're paying property
That base
tax.
is usually
Yep.
And that's a tough one.
You've been paying property tax. That piece of land has been paying property tax for decades.
I think the short and skinny of it is,
Why doesn't the county provide this? I don't know, I just have,
that's a good question.
yeah,
But I think the short and skinny of it
They
is,
don't have water.
down the water here.
before we move into that project, right now, this is just a rough estimate of what it would cost to do something. And as we move forward, we're gonna get more analysis, more of those things before any decisions are made to help you make
Right.
such a decision.
Yeah, we don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I gotcha. I just,
You guys
I would be
do
wary of
remember and
that.
understand that you can take stuff off this list. and then
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can do with this, like what we did with the infill dirt. You can say, hey, this is one we'd like to consider, but we're not putting it in a specific year yet until we get more info. Things like that.
hopefully by 2023, they will have power at Westwater and they will be digging wells at least by then. It's the goal.
So on this, what I look at here,
I mean, like, questions, maybe, I don't know, like, my biggest frustration with this capital projects list is at what point are we going to get the projects on the list and keep them on top of the list that are gonna benefit the taxpayers? Like, they're the ones, it's their money, like, that's their stuff, but we keep moving these things down and now we're doing more plans. At what point does it look like we just are doing all these plans, which I think we should do. I'm not saying that those are bad. I mean, it's hard to say, yeah, let's do it again, and
I think
come
that's
next year and yeah, let's drop all these down and do it again.
That's a discussion that us as staff actually had, that exact same thing. And that's the purpose of saying, let's do these plans so that we can actually say, yep, you as council, I should say, can say, yep, we're for sure doing it in this year because we know we've planned ahead to make this happen. But right now we don't. I don't want to be as flippant to say we're armchair quarterbacking, but to some degree, it feels a little bit like that. We kind of know we need to do this, but do we have to do it this year? And we've got funding. It helps us prioritize better. So I would agree with you 100%. So.
well, so if the planning helps establish those things on more of a concrete timeline, I think that's the frustration maybe a lot of us have had. But I look at the cost of each of those plans, and I think that it seems like an outrageously large number.
So for the Parks and Trails plan, 50,000 we did in Saratoga Springs for a population of, well, it grew between 30 and 40,000. So I would suspect, and we've seen other numbers where a community like ours would probably be between 20 and 30,000 for a plan like that. But that's pretty typical. To be quite honest with you, if you want a full, robust plan that's going to help you plan ahead.
So 20 is a lot easier to swallow than 50. So 20 is the number I'd want to be looking at. I mean, I want to see a number there that is close to what we're really going to spend, and not a number that I say I'm not spending that much. It
Well, I
might
mean,
have
we
a
could-
value, but doesn't have that much value. I
And
don't
we can
know.
adjust that to say, I would recommend putting it to 30. I think even though we're small, the cost isn't proportional to population always necessarily. So I would say, between 25 and 30 might be more wise to put.
So I'm seeing the long-term theme here. I mean, the big picture is if you can get these plans in place, there's a maintenance plan for Parks and Rec. And we anticipate this thing needs to be replaced or refurbished or repaired 3 years from now. And so we budget for it or fundraise for it or whatever, grants or whatever. And then then when it comes up in that year, we have the budget for it and we do it. And that's part of why what's been showing up there has then just got pushed back is because then we find out what the cost is and we say, well, we don't have the budget for it.
And there was no plan for it.
So there wasn't a long-term plan for the shade structures, for example, and we knew a price 3 years ago, knowing that it would grow over time, but we haven't been earmarking a certain amount of funds towards that. We've just kind of had it floating out there and then we get the estimate on it and these are pretty huge numbers and it's kind of hard to bite off on those.
Well, the shade structure is a great example. So when the 75,000 came in those few years ago, you guys, from what I understand, gasped at the price. Well, now it's almost double that. And so.
Have we
yeah,
looked at other places? I mean,
Yes,
What we gasped at was the $100,000 for installation,
right.
that shade structure, and I still see that's what it is. It was what, 70?
Mhm.
Some of these was-
So-
I mean, it's,
Also, you want to consider that these projects are also going to be determined which ones you do will be based on budget. Budget numbers.
I thought we had budgeted for the pavilion. I thought we'd budgeted for the pavilion here at the park.
Okay.
And it came
Came
in
at 55.
Yeah. So that's some of the issues.
so then what do we do with that 35? Because that was in
It
this
just
year.
stays in the reserves. Right?
Like that's, I
Right,
mean,
well, we
honestly,
can
that's
get
my
something
thing. is if-
done.
Yeah, like let's do something. Like, I mean, we didn't even get to put these there. Like they were put there by whoever and then like, I don't know, it's just extremely frustrating. And then,
Do you want to do something different, Morgan?
I don't know.
You can
I don't know is the
deal
thing,
with
like the
this.
whole this process for the last like 3 years has always just been the same and it is getting continually frustrating.
So if
And I don't know the answer to fix it. Like, I'm not saying like, here's the answer, let's do this, but
I think to step back, so last council meeting, we were looking for council to tell us what you wanted to wear. But what we as staff heard was you come tell us what we should wear. And so that's what we did this time. So we're all ears to hear you tell us what you want wear. But after going through it, this would be our staff recommendation to accomplish, I think, what you're trying to get at. Honestly, if there's one project in here where you're like, you know what, we feel like it would go a long way to put in the pavilion. I mean, that's your discretion as the body of the council to decide. But looking at these numbers, I mean, it's hard for us as staff to make a recommendation. Yeah, go for that one, you know. They were just hard numbers to swallow. It's just the reality.
But see, for me, I look at this and you want to do a rec master plan, which I agree with and we actually need, but that's $50,000 versus putting in a shade structure that our citizens are actually going to see and see the benefit of their tax dollars at work. And I want to get something done. That's why we pay taxes for our infrastructure and for the management and proper operation of the city, but.
Right. I would just, first of all, I totally agree, and I think we're all on the same page. I think the thought process is, and we'll have frustrated residents because of that, but the thought process here is, are we trying to get a short-term win or a long-term win? And I would say putting the money into these plans is the long-term win that will help us in moving forward, get a lot of short-term wins along the way.
Maybe we could see a copy of a plan because it feels like to me like a plan would just do what this is supposed to be doing in the first place. What approving these capital improvements are supposed to be doing. and it's spinning wheels, and I feel like a plan would do the same thing. So, but maybe if I could see one.
Yeah, no, the plan basically is your guiding document where it will tell you, in 5 years, so for example, in Saratoga Springs, we looked at, here's our population and here's our parks, our acreage. The recommendation level of service for a city our size is to have this X number of acres for parks. Well, we say that X number of acres was, I'm just making up a number, 100 acres. But for our resident population, the recommendation is that we should have 150 acres. Well, then that tells us in the plan, within 5 years, you should be working to acquire another 50 acres of parks. And so that tells us, here's where we need to be spending our capital dollars. That's how those plans function. They won't tell you, and they'll give you lots of scenarios. So they'll say, here's the issue with parks, here's the issue with trails, here's planning with streets. Now you as a council see that in year 5, we have like 10 things, but we can only address 5. Which 5 do you want to address? That's the purpose. So, I agree, it's frustrating because you want to have those small wins for the residents to say.
We haven't had any wins for the past few
Right.
years.
We had
I'll
the-
entertain a comment from staff here.
And so first, I can't speak for everyone's department, but short-term wise, and I'm only answering this because it's mine on the capital projects, and it's where I've been communicating with people. The Parks and Rec planning manager, like Wise Pratt doing Parks and Rec, David will be involved eventually as well. But where this came up was Cal Black from the DWR said, we want to do something at recapture. You have this massive lake, huge economic development opportunity, nothing's happening. 5 years or so, we'll have some money. We want to talk to you guys. We want to get to your city council, everything. We're like, okay, we've kind of got some money. We'll look into that. And then he pretty much called back and said, projects have dropped through. We want to do some things. Then at the same time, the BLM has said similar things of, we've got projects that are coming your way, and seeing how Landing City's the only one that can really help facilitate those projects. We want to work with you guys, but you have to have something that says,
Here's our plan.
here's your plan. Along with that, the outdoor rec grant program that happens every year, which is, $100 million grant, they do tons of stuff every year. They wanted to see planning. So at least for the outdoor rec part of it, that would be like in the next 2 to 5 years, you'd see big projects come in that we're virtually paying like $100,000 to see $1 million worth of infrastructure and stuff being put in, and people really trying to invest in our community. So that's where the planning on that one specific one that I can speak on, it's a short-term and a long-term, very beneficial. I mean, you're looking at trails, fishing, boating, outdoor rec, OHV trails, and the list goes on.
So in terms of
That specifically,
If one
is
thing
very
could come
good.
out of some planning is to establish the O&M of these things. Because if somebody gave me, I say I can't afford to buy a houseboat.
right?
They're $250,000. I can't afford one. If somebody gave me one, I would sell it immediately because I can't afford to maintain a houseboat. And so we might get granted a houseboat, but we might not want it because you still have to maintain it. And the long-term costs of any capital investment is O&M over time far exceeds the acquisition costs, especially if it's free or cheap.
Right.
And the danger we have here is that I look at all the stuff that we've got listed here, and these are all fluff. And what I mean by that isn't that they don't have value and they don't contribute to a community, and there is a value to all of these different things, but they're not utilities. It's not power, water, sewer, police, and fire. I mean, when you start prioritizing what's truly a need versus what's a nice thing to have, you got to be really careful on spending the money on the things that are nice to have, and then also adopting the long-term costs. And an example of this is the ball fields. The ball fields are a fantastic asset for the community, but can we afford the infill dirt at $125,000 now to maintain that asset. And we all look at that number and about choke, and we're going, okay, see, that's what I'm talking about, is you got to be really careful on this planning that you're saying, okay, that we could acquire an asset, but what's the long-term cost? And that's part of that plan, is to plan into the budget, how are we going to maintain this long-term? That's the affordability.
Right.
The price tag up front isn't it. It's O&M over 30, 40, 50 years. That's what you got to pay for.
Right. So for example, in a Parks and Recreation Master Plan, it might tell you your future to expand the wellness center, and here's the X number of staff you would need to help give you a better idea of the O&M like the mayor's talking about. I think one thing to bring it back, as far as the Parks and Rec is concerned, master plan, Pratt's point is actually pretty critical right now of when they saw that we already had $50,000 set aside for outdoor recreation, they said, okay, we're willing to come to the table with similar amounts of dollars. And then BLM came and said, hey, we want to see things happening. And all we need is if we can make the argument that you're planning on putting together a master plan, we can already get started. And so there's your short-term wins while we're doing the long-term planning. So yeah, I don't know. I think
I'm good with that. I say we put it to 30,000, like we've talked about.
Each of them.
I mean, yeah, if we can, like, I think that.
Yes, you see how much.
Can we come up with money for the Central Parks structure, 25,000?
If there's consent from the body of the council to
For
do
what?
that,
For
there's
the shade structure that we budgeted 30,000 for.
The pavilion one.
Pavilion or shade structure?
Pavilion, sorry, not the shade structures yet.
I know,
just
I
the-
kept
Just the
interchanging them
pavilion.
too.
Well, then, so
was approved by
things are pretty
council.
specific here. I mean, the visitor center, we know what that is. You've given us a list of what that is, what the water master plan update would be. We haven't talked about that as much, but I think we get the idea behind a master plan. Street maintenance project, $300,000. What is that? Like,
So that's actually go ahead.
That'll be based on our pavement management, but that's chip seal, that's slurry seal, that's just maintaining the existing pavement that we already have, making it last in the future.
And say for example, next year we find that 250, we only need 250 toward that. We could, I'm just
Or
making.
550.
Yeah, right. But we could say, for example, we're planning for 300 because that's about how much it costs, but we come in around 250 and we've got that extra 50, we could put that towards updating our streets maintenance plan, for example.
at what point will we know what that's gonna cost? I mean, we have to plan for that as well, obviously. At what point do we kind of get an idea of this is the
We
damage?
spend all of our C road money on road maintenance and it's never enough.
Never
I
mind.
mean, honestly, it's not like there's never extra C road money. We're always in a budget shortfall on road maintenance. But we're working on that. I run the pavement management software and we do a really good job on what roads need which treatments to get the best bang for our buck. But we've never fleshed that thing out with a financial component so we know, okay, this year is 300,000, next year's 400,000, and that's been one of our goals to try and get that going. So hopefully we have that, this year.
And that's what I was meaning by Kim and I are gonna start fleshing out this list a little
The
bit.
calendar of which roads are coming up for which
Right,
maintenance. And you
exactly.
put numbers on it year by year.
And that's what I was saying is Kim and I are gonna be, as we start doing master plans and working on this, Kim and I are gonna be refining this capital projects list. So next year, knock on wood, cross your fingers, whatever you wanna say, this component of discussion won't even be here because we'll be more confident in how we're moving forward.
Cheryl, are you thinking you want to do that this fiscal year or next?
Well, we talked last meeting about next
This
July,
upcoming-
August or something like that.
About what? I'm sorry.
The pavilion.
The shade
Not
structure,
doing
or
it.
the pavilion.
We probably wouldn't
We'll
have.
put it
it
on
this
next
year,
year's budget, just like this year.
But they can do it in August.
So after July.
What about the excess sales tax dollars?
Well, they'd have to be budgeted to be spent, so we'll budget them for next year. If you want to do it this year, one thing that you could do with council approval would be take the money that we had budgeted for it this year and the money that we had budgeted for the shade structures and reassign them to your pavilion. I just don't know if we can get that done between now and the end of June. I don't know if we can.
So that's what you're thinking,
Getting the
to do
materials.
it for next year.
That was
That
the
gives us a
discussion
little bit more
in the
time.
last meeting was we're not
Just
gonna get it built
working
by
on it,
August.
finding bids and trying to round out the materials, because some of that, the steel and that kind of stuff is hard to get right now. But if we budgeted for, after July, then maybe we can pull it together between July and June of the next year.
I mean, just.
So
And
one,
we could add that to this,
A lot of people talk.
to this year, if that's what council decided to do, and we'll just take the money we have set aside this year and roll it to next year for it. Does that make sense?
One thing though that I would want to do is just get input from David as our rec director, because a pavilion like that takes O&M like the mayor was talking about. And I don't know if he would prioritize the pavilion over the shade structure at the ballpark. And the shade structure, maybe we've got the cost for the shade structure at the ballpark, and that's labor and the actual product. But maybe if we can install it ourselves and just pay for the product. I don't know, David, do you want to speak to how you would prioritize the shade structure versus the pavilion?
Well, first, any of these projects are a benefit to the community. So I'm happy to have you say that you're going to go on any of them. However, there isn't any shade right now at the ballparks, but we're not talking comparing apples to apples at the same time either, because if we don't have the money, the shade structures turned out to be way more than we had anticipated. So we're talking 55,000 to 125. So it's a huge difference. We didn't have the money to do the shade structures. I'll 100% take that pavilion and whistle all the way home. But I would love to see those shade structures just because it's something we wanted for so long, just don't have any shade at that park. We hope that the trees would take care of that, but they grow so slow. So.
Can we go to
I
other
agree.
companies and something for this? Like, is this something we could have someone design?
We've gone to the
local? I
state
don't know.
contractor, the people who have the state bid, and other people, and found that the state bids came in much lower than the others. That's probably why they won the state bids.
That's kind of the rule of thumb. Doesn't always happen.
Right. But that's what we found on these particular ones.
But yeah, if there's consent from the body of the council, I've heard one so far about the shade structure, or the pavilion, keeping it in, putting it in. I don't know.
If we're looking at budget for next year, I would actually agree with the shade structures. I would agree with you. If we're looking at doing this next year anyway because we can't get anything in until then, it makes sense to maybe look at,
That's my
to do it then
recommendation.
and maybe look at the
Save
shade
some money.
structure, see if we can fit shade structures into the budget. Do this the following year.
That's actually
That would be my
recommendation.
If we can't, then do this one.
Is I would say take the money from both of those and put it toward the shade structure for next fiscal
Yeah.
year. That's what I would
Good
recommend.
idea.
So,
I missed a lot of discussion on the pavilion. Is there a big need for pavilion at that park? I mean, is it good?
Yeah.
It's just been in the dialogue where people used to have a lot of those things, a lot of things on that
But
south
it's
side of the
cheap.
pool, on that cement slab that was there and.
It was for like.
So it's just been a discussion to
Fall
put up a shade
festivals.
structure there.
We've held lots of events there and there's really nowhere it's not effective to hold events
We
there,
have a
but it
city
is a great
council.
location because it draws
We're
people.
talking about the park by the church.
Pool, where the pool used to be. Yeah.
They can,
And that would just be a pavilion.
right
there.
next to the tennis court, right?
that makes more sense there than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one would be the baseball field shade
Right.
structures.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is we as staff make our recommendations and things to consider, but you as the body of the council, it's your decision.
Well, I guess I would propose this idea here. I like the idea of getting some planning in that plans budgetary wise. I mean, this is my company. What's left of it, I don't much anymore, but I say, I know I'm gonna need to do this. And so I'm setting aside, I do with my home budget. I know I'm gonna replace a car in so many years, so I save for it for 5 years. And that's the most valuable component of what this planning is, I think, is planning the O&M, the budget for the O&M, and planning the budget for the capital expansions.
Right.
And so we can actually look at dollars and say, what can we really afford? Not just what would be nice. Lots of things would be nice. I would love to drive a Rolls Royce, but I don't. And so, but as far as the cost of each of these plans, they look tremendously expensive. And I take that you're just putting a big placeholder in there. So let's get, can somebody give us a quote on a master plan before we pull the trigger and say, yes, give us that plan?
Yeah, so we did get rough estimates for these numbers by, calling other cities and things like that. But I agree, yeah, we would, this is a filler number, and then before we get a plan, we would get a hard estimate, go to bid, and see what the bids come in at, and see.
Because we have a spending policy that says that we will. Amazing.
With the shade structures, I mean, personally, like, I think that we should, like, I like that idea. I don't necessarily like the design of these. Like, I don't know if the fabric's gonna hold up. I think we could maybe do something different. I don't know. I haven't been looking.
These are
They're actually
removable for
nice.
during the winter time to double the life of them.
I don't like the price of them.
I know that's my biggest thing is the price makes it so I don't like them.
That's why
honestly.
they've moved off the list.
Right.
Is that for
You're
4?
thinking if they're,
Eight.
eight, yeah,
2 per field.
yeah.
So we might could cut that back even.
You get like netting that's shaded that.
So I guess
We don't have any.
we need a little direction here on how to move forward with this from council. So we'll take the recreation master plan, put it down to 30. Do we want to add the shade structure into next year and combine the cost that we were going to put toward the shade structure and the pavilion, or vice versa? How would the council like to approach that?
I prefer the shade structures at the ball fields over the pavilion.
I agree.
The pavilion has money budgeted for it this year,
We're saying
35,000.
move that to next year.
Yeah, we roll that.
If we can fit the shade structures, if we can't, then do the pavilion.
That should work, right?
Is that the,
If we can.
I've heard 2. I need at least 3 to.
I wonder on shade structures if there's not a whole different concept. The cost.
I would like to look at something different, and I'll help look at something different. I don't
I
have
just
the
can't swallow
answer.
that cost.
Yeah,
I agree, yeah.
You need it now. Yeah.
I don't know how that will
I
happen
just
or
wonder
whatever,
if
but
there's
still,
not
we could
different-
say that and.
Is there a different way of building them that costs half as much? That would be really interested to know.
Yeah, we'd have to look at it.
So, Felicia, I think we've
We went past.
had a lot of discussion on this. So the piece that I see that's missing is we've talked about lights at the baseball field. It's been on this list since before I became a council member. But I don't feel like there's not a financial piece where we are saving for those lights.
Right.
That's what I
That
was
piece is
getting at.
completely missing from this capital process for me.
100%.
We do it the next year, the ones that are in the next year, and we approve them, we're paying for those things, but we're not planning, we're not saving for things that have been on this list for years. So that part I don't.
You have, but you're not getting that, you haven't seen where that's been growing in there.
Oh, okay.
This baseball lighting stuff has actually been on our CIB list, and it's on there still, unless you've done something with
So by
that.
March 1st, we got to move.
Because
some
we're
of what we're gonna
hoping,
request.
hoping that at some point CIB will help fund those lights. But there's also, if we're putting lights on those ball fields, then we probably ought to have some input from the school district where they use 2 of those fields.
Right.
So there's some of those conversations.
So
that
if
need to
you-
be done, but
if you
there
came to
is some savings going on.
If you came to the meeting though and said, okay, we've now saved $100,000 towards those lights,
And we-
it would make our decision
Yeah.
so much easier.
That's
Then-
what we were talking about when I said to Kim, I'm like, you know what I really want to see? Is essentially what you're saying. I'm like, I want to see what % of our total cash flow or cash savings
Exactly.
that this is
It's meant
coming
for
out
these
from.
things.
Right, exactly. And so say our reserves are 23% of the city's budget. Well, what % for this $200,000 project is is spending from that 23%.
Right,
So,
totally agree with that.
so that's the idea, is that this, honestly, this is a placeholder for what we have been doing, and we identified some projects that we felt were important and we shifted them around. But what we're saying is we're going to refine this over this next year to really tell a better story in the
And
future.
the financial component will be the most important part of it.
Exactly.
And I think I'd love to see cheaper shade structures. I don't know if they're out there, but I think the shade structures, in my opinion, the value is there. But I think it'd be easier to swallow if you'd said, okay, we've been saving these for these shade structures, 25,000 a year for the last 5 years, and now we have the money set aside.
Yeah.
It feels like that's
But
what this
that's
should
what's
be
gonna
used
come
for, and
from the
that's not
plan.
what's happening
We do put money into savings every year, remember?
for the capital improvement
We
project.
approve, well, we do that, but we also put so much into Parks and Recreation.
Right.
Every year we make those transfers, and we do a resolution.
So when we're looking at this list, we don't know what
But you want to
that
know what
amount
the
is.
total
Yeah,
is of that.
yeah. How much have we saved towards this project?
I think that would be beneficial. I think that would be helpful as you're making a decision, because at this point, I'm looking at those numbers and I'm trying to calculate in my head what we really have in there to make those happen. And I think that's something that you need to be made aware of, so that as you make these decisions, you're basing it on funding and not just on.
Can we come
What
up with
should
the
we
money?
do?
Right.
Or do we
Should have
already
been
have,
saving for these things
do we already
already,
have
and
the
that,
money?
I don't,
And we have.
Good,
They're
okay.
there. It's there.
So you can't tell under my mask, but I'm grinning big, because what you're saying and what the whole council is saying are the exact same things that Kim and I have been discussing on how to better present this, because the money is there. We are saving money, but how do you know that? How do I know that as the city administrator? I don't, looking at this. And so that's what we're talking about, refining more.
So I think what we can do, and this is just this suggestion, is that if you go ahead and approve this right now, then when we get to the budget and we sit down in our budget meeting, then we can actually have those numbers available, so you can see what we've got, where we've been saving. For some of these things, like the water master plan, where's that gonna come from, and how much is in the capital savings for that plan? Do we have enough? Do we wanna spend that? And we could do that through the budget, which may require that you decide you need to drop some of these. I think it will help reduce some of the frustration with what you're doing, and it'll be just like at home. I've only got so much in my checkbook, even though I wanna do all this.
right.
I can only do this much. And I think that would be really helpful. I do.
I totally agree. So we need to approve this
Yes,
tonight, right?
yes. This is not to adopt it.
This is a
it's just-
working
Just for you
Yeah.
guys to submit, yeah.
So is the proposal to put the shade structures on there, but we're still pursuing, and Logan's writing them.
Other bids.
Looking for other alternatives that we can entertain, and maybe it
That's
comes
what
in
I-
at a lot less money for virtually the same function.
And-
Hopefully we find something like that.
I think we should put the pavilion back on there.
Just leave them both on and then look for a way
Next year, maybe
to
the
make it
year
happen
after.
and see what the savings
Or
is.
yeah.
Putting them on the list doesn't mean we're spending the money. Putting them on the list means that we're working
saving.
towards that.
Do I hear consent from the council?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll put them back on there.
That was really enthusiastic.
I know, that's why I'm like.
We don't, we're not seeing this work.
If I got to put them on there to not do them, sure.
And they'll be gone next week.
And then it will be $1 million to do anything. Yes.
It is what it feels like, but I like the direction we're going to get financial planning element that's progressing, so that we go, yeah, I am saving up for that, and now I'm gonna buy it. I
Right.
found it at the price I liked, it was on sale, and I have the money saved up. Then it's an easy decision.
Well, it's like
We haven't had that.
it's kind of like I was telling Jim the other day. I said, I look at this and it tells me some good numbers, but I feel like I'm a bit of a deer in headlights of how we came to these numbers. And that's what I'm hearing here too. And so we can help tell that story better.
Okay,
So,
let's do it. We might not ever leave because Katie's not here. I don't know of any reason for an executive
Do we
process.
need to have a motion on this?
we do need a motion to.
A motion to adopt it
capital projects.
I think it's approving.
To approve.
I'll make a motion, we approve the capital projects.
With the,
With the additions that we're doing and the shade structure being put in.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's Turk and Bowers, all in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, we had the, it was all out there, so we knew. Okay.
Thank you.
make a motion that we adjourn.
That's Monson and Turk, all in favor? We didn't do too
I
bad.
thought you were going to get that one.
Well, but I thought you were putting on your tracking shoes.
Yeah. Long day.
Holy, those
So-
capital improvement discussions are ridiculous. We do that every year.
We get the plat done, then we have the public hearing and do that, so we don't have a problem with that 60-day period. But Jeremy was getting a lot of pressure from the, you know, this landowner, let's get this thing going, let's get this thing going. So he set the public hearing. And then we called Brad, you know, he told me, he said, hey, we did this. I was gone somewhere that, when you guys had that meeting, but he said, hey, we did this. So get a hold of Brad and let's get a plat, you know. So I called Brad and I said, Brad, we need this plat.
Like the middle of September.
September 9th. I think it was September 9th.
And when did we start?
I don't know when we started, but we didn't get it until January 16th, which was a Saturday. You know, so when people send stuff to us on the weekend like that, I mean, you know, and so before we even got the plat, it was already outdated because the state of Utah required, and they change that stuff, Joe, if not every year, every 2 or 3 years.
Anyway, this gap here, that's the biggest thing is we got it on, but still it's been a long time since January 16th. So we're 5 weeks out from January 16th, which still, we still would have been able